Hello and welcome one and all to this week's edition of TV Coast to Coast, our weekly swap meet of opinions from televisions on each of our nation's coasts, east, west, north, and south. I'm Mark DeWitziak, TV critic at the Cleveland Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. And joining me on the panel today are Christy Turnquist of the Oregonian and OregonLive.com. Hi, Christy.
Hello.
And Dave Walker of New Orleans Time-Picayune and NOLA.com. Vicki Hyman of the New Jersey's Star Ledger and NJ.com will be back in the rotation next week. It's another hodgepodge week for us, and if there's a common theme, it has eluded me. We almost had an actual theme because both Dave and Christy will be talking about high-profile documentaries. Then I had to break the string by choosing one of those darn cable dramas that we're always talking about. So we're lacking theme, except perhaps that each of us will be discussing an ambitious and challenging show. First up is a documentary that's the centerpiece of a slate of PBS programming commemorating the 40th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. Produced and directed by Rory-Kennedy, Last Days in Vietnam premieres Tuesday, April 28th on American Experience. And Dave is here to tell us about it. Dave?
Thanks, Mark. Well, a lot of people of my vintage lived through these years. I think I was in high school in '75 when Saigon fell. But of course, we've all sort of lived with the aftermath of this war ever since. This documentary goes back to the evacuation of Saigon and tells the haunting story of how we end our wars these days. To me, it had all kinds of echoes of what's happening right now in our other wars. But it's beautifully told. It's by Rory-Kennedy, who's RFK's daughter. You know, talk about someone who's lived with the war her whole life, from childhood on. It's got great new footage of a lot of the flotilla, the incredible story of the South Vietnamese warships that managed to sneak away at the very last minute with 30,000 refugees, many of whom settled or have descendants who settled in the New Orleans area. The documentary is not easy to watch at all, but I thought it was profoundly moving in many ways, and with great talking head interviews and great scene setting, and then execution of the story, which I say is still alive today. It's part of several PBS programs that are airing right now in this time frame. Monday was Dick Cavett's Vietnam and a piece about the draft. Also tonight is a documentary about Kent State, the National Guard killings at Kent State. And Mark, you were telling me that you teach there, and that there are, it's possible to sort of live or relive the events of that day by what's set up there. Anyway, I'll recommend Last Days of Vietnam and then get out of your way real quick.
Yes, I do teach at Kent State. I teach 2 classes every semester out there, and I have to say that one of the wonderful things the university does is they have embraced that history. The May 4th Visitor Center is a profoundly moving experience, and it is in Taylor Hall, which is right where the shootings took place. The spots where the students fell, it's in a parking lot now, but each spot where a student fell has been it's a little memorial with the student's name, and you can walk the grounds. They have a walking tour at Kent State and plaques describing exactly what happened in sequence, and each plaque has a picture that lines up with what you're looking at. So you can line up tree to tree, building to building, and you can see what happened and how it happened, and it's just an incredibly moving thing to do. So you're right, Dave. We are haunted. I was in high school as well when Saigon fell, and it's obviously a seminal experience for our generation, and something we're still coping with. We're still trying to get our mind around, especially considering the number of wars and misadventures we've been involved with since then. So an equally difficult documentary to watch, from what I understand, is what Christy will be talking about. And it's a far different topic, but no less difficult to watch. She'll be telling us about writer-director Brett Morgen's study of Nirvana frontman Kurt Cobain, Montage of Heck. It premieres on HBO on Monday, May 4th, and it was made with the cooperation of his family. So, Christy, what did we think?
Well, as you say, this is not really an easy thing to watch because, it is made, it is an approved, family-approved documentary, and so there's so much missing. There are so many details, so much context missing about what forces really sort of helped shape Kurt Cobain when he was a little kid, little tow-headed toddler there, growing up in Aberdeen, Washington. We hear his mother's version of events, which is not by any means a complete version. We hear Courtney Love share her take. Again, not that's her point of view. It's not a complete take. It's interesting in that an executive producer is Frances Bean Cobain, the daughter of Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love. And, the more I watched this, the more I thought she emerges as the hero, even though we don't see her as an adult. We just see her as a baby. But for anybody to emerge whole from this kind of background seems like a huge victory, because there's just dysfunction everywhere you look in this story. It takes us very much inside the mind of Kurt Cobain, who, had a lot of demons, obviously, and was obviously completely creative. I mean, even from a young age, he had this irrepressible urge to just express himself. And, we have access to his journals, old tape recordings, demo versions of songs, just drawings, everywhere you look, every kind of medium you can imagine, he would use it to try to express himself. Now, not all of this is a treasure trove, mind you. And one of the things that is saddest in this sad story is the idea that, with a variety of sort of undiagnosed and undertreated ailments, this guy didn't really have a chance. I mean, he suffered from severe depression from his earliest days as a kid, and obviously he then later developed a terrible addiction problem. And it just makes you wonder, maybe had he been born a few years later, I don't know, it's an easy thing to say, maybe there might have been some sort of intervention for him that might have helped. But then again, it's not that long ago that he died, so it makes you think that, no matter what anybody else might have done, this was a guy who just wasn't going to be able to get it together. We do have the music of Nirvana. Obviously, it's interesting to go back to their early days when they were just a Northwest band playing around in Olympia, Washington, Seattle, Portland, other places along the West Coast. And it's great to see some of that early footage. I mean, they were a terrific band. And, as it's very difficult to watch the MTV Unplugged performance, because you realize that Cobain had a real musician's gift, and as a songwriter, he had a tremendous natural flair for melody. I'm not the first to point that out. But for a band that started out, out of the punk rock movement, this guy really knew how to write a song. So it's sad that he's gone, but as I say, it's kind of a frustrating thing to watch, because you just know that there's more to the story, which has been covered in various books and biographies, but it's very intimate in terms of taking us inside Kurt, but we still don't come away with much of an understanding other than this was a guy who just didn't seem to have a chance. So on that happy note,
hey, hey, Mark, I'm going to step in. I have the same reservations that Christy does about it, but I would recommend the documentary just for the craft of its making alone. This was a difficult topic, but Brett Morgen, the filmmaker, animates like notebook scratches and drawings, and there's long sequences of animation that are set to like audio montages that Cobain made, and it was like startlingly weird and creepy in a lot of ways. I sort of second Christie's reservations about the scope of the thing, but the craft of it was really compelling to me. So
we'd say intriguing, innovative, but frustratingly not definitive.
It is what it is. It's something that provides a lot of access to, Kurt Cobain's inner creative self. Again, through the prism of his family, it's a shame it's not able to step back and give us a little more complete picture. But yeah, the animated sequences are really haunting. They're very well done.
Yeah.
Well, let me change it up, and I'll actually try to make a theme here. And I'm doing this on the fly. So if this comes out stumbling a bit, I apologize for that. But it struck me as we were talking that, first off, I'm going to be talking about a horror drama. So, but one of the things was the great boom in horror storytelling really occurred in the 1970s. It's when Stephen King and Anne Rice really started to get up and writing. It was when John Carpenter and Wes Craven and other filmmakers really started going. There was a huge horror boom in the 1970s. It was when the slasher film was at its height towards the end of that decade and then going into the 1980s. And I'm not the first to point this out, that this was a generation that had dealt with the horrors of the Vietnam War, that they were metaphorically working out a whole lot of things. And a lot of people who made those films either were in Vietnam, some of the special effects people, and what they had seen. So, and there's also been a tie, and I'm going to do this with Christy too, there's a huge tie between rock music and horror storytelling. They are both about rebellion, danger, something that's attractive and yet dangerous at the same time. So all of these things kind of go into the mix of what I think one of the best horror series on TV right now, which is Penny Dreadful. Horror is always given us the metaphoric means to work through things we do not like to think about. Things about the human condition, things about ourselves we don't like to think about. Penny Dreadful digs very deep into this territory. Films have pretty much given up on the intelligent horror stories, preferring instead to serve up a steady diet of formulaic torture porn epics and vapid remakes. And I don't really care, as long as somebody is doing intelligent, well-made horror storytelling. And on television, you'll find a lot of those somebodies right now. They're working on everything from AMC's The Walking Dead to FX's The Strain, both of which return later this year with new seasons. And at Showtime, that somebody is John Logan, the writer-producer behind yet another bloody good horror series, Penny Dreadful. It's got demons, monsters, curses, great characters. It's stylish, it's beautifully filmed, and it is a world where science and superstition walk hand in hand, as it is said in a Rod Serling-esque way by the group leader in the series, Sir Malcolm Murray, played to the stylish hilt by Timothy Dalton. This series is not for tender sensibilities or anemic imaginations. The conceit is that it takes characters from great 19th century horror literature, including Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, and it blends them with original characters, and it does this in a wonderfully stylish and imaginative way. In the first season, we were introduced to how this band of hunters came together, fighting supernatural forces, and as we were told, when you are no longer the hunter, you become the prey. And that's a bit of a theme as the second season begins Sunday night, with the group facing new and intriguing supernatural challenges. I don't want to say too much more about what's going to happen because this series is delightful on surprises. It's delightful on pulling shocks out for you. I will point out just two things. One is that the title is almost ironic. The Penny Dreadfuls were a form of weekly storytelling that flourished in the 1800s in England. They were called the Penny Dreadfuls because they were cheaply done. They cost a penny and the writing was dreadful. The two most famous Penny Dreadfuls were Varney the Vampire, which ran for something like 242 weeks, and Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. The writing in those notoriously lurid 19th century stories were pretty bad. I do not recommend them to anybody. Every once in a while somebody says, should I read Varney the Vampire? And I say, no, you should not, unless you are really in for a horrific experience. But the writing in Penny Dreadful is rich, literate, and dare I say it, terrifyingly good. One of the reasons I like not only The Walking Dead and this series is because of something Stephen King said. Now, Stephen King knows a thing or two about scaring people. And Stephen King once said that horror works on 3 levels. At the top level, there's terror. Terror works on your brain. It's what you can intellectualize and think about. War is one of those topics, by the way. Underneath terror is what the genre is called for, horror. It's the stuff that works on your heart. It makes your heart beat faster. Sometimes you can't intellectualize it. You're in a dark basement, your pulse races a little fast, the hairs on the back of your neck go up, and you don't know why. It's horror. It works on your heart. Brain, heart. Underneath that is the gross out. Underneath that is the thing that turns your stomach. And that's how horror works. Brain, heart, stomach. And as Stephen King said, he always goes for the highest level. He always goes for horror, but if he can't, for terror. And if he can't get terror, he goes for horror. So he's after your brain, and if he can't get your brain, he'll get your heart. And if he can't get your heart, he's not proud. I'll go for the gross out. I'll do what I can. But great horror works on all three levels. Penny Dreadful works on all three levels. So does The Walking Dead. That's hard to pull off. Deceptively hard to pull off. And that's why I can't recommend Penny Dreadful more than I have all along. If you haven't seen it, try it. That's it. Anybody want to weigh in on that?
I've got to get caught up. It sounds
Me too.
great.
I'm way behind.
All right.
I confess.
Well, then I guess we have worked our way through the week. I will be out of the rotation next week, and Vicki Hyman will be sitting here. So until then, keep watching and enjoy. Take care. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Mark.